I came back to the town just before sunset, when the sky turns the color of old paper and everything feels unfinished. The road signs still lean to the left, the paint flaking, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. I told myself I was only here to settle paperwork, to sell the house, to leave again before the memories had time to wake up. The smell was the first thing that didn't fit. It reached me inside the house, while the windows were still closed and the air was stale from months of emptiness. A faint scent of wet soil and dust, like a basement after rain. I stood still, holding my keys, waiting for it to fade. It didn't. When I opened a window, the smell thinned but stayed, clinging to the walls, to my clothes, to the back of my throat. Outside, the street was quieter than I remembered. No traffic, no music, only the low voices of children somewhere near the old playground. I followed the sound without thinking, drawn by a rhythm I recognized before I could name it. They were playing the game. I hadn't thought about it in years, not since I left. We never had a name for it, just rules we all seemed to know. 5 of them. I could still recite them in my head, the way you remember a rhyme you were told not to forget. The children moved carefully, almost politely, as if the space between them mattered more than the game itself. I watched from across the street. None of them noticed me. When one of the girls laughed, the sound felt wrong, too loud for the empty houses around us. For a moment, the smell returned, stronger now, drifting through the open air where it shouldn't have existed at all. An older woman stepped out onto her porch and pulled the girl away by the wrist. She didn't look angry, she looked tired. "Don't play after dark," she said, her voice flat. "You know better." The girl nodded, not confused, not scared, just obedient. That night back in the house, I washed my hands 3 times. The smell stayed. It settled into the sheets when I lay down, into my hair, into my breath. I told myself it was stress, memory, the town settling around me again. But as the sun went down, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. The game hadn't waited for me to return. It had already begun. I tried to sleep, counting the familiar cracks in the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere outside, a door closed. Somewhere closer, I thought I heard bare feet on pavement, stopping just short of my window. The smell deepened, patient and calm, as if the night itself had recognized me. By morning, the smell was gone. The house felt lighter, almost ordinary, as if the night had been a private misunderstanding. I told myself that was proof nothing was wrong. Smells don't mean anything. Towns don't remember people. Games don't follow you into adulthood. By afternoon, I was already lying to myself. I went back to the playground just before sunset. I didn't plan to. My feet simply carried me there, following the same pull I used to feel as a child, when curiosity outweighed caution. The children were already gathered, spaced evenly, careful not to touch. No phones, no parents hovering nearby. They looked practiced. I wrote the rules down in my notebook as I watched. 5 rules, exactly as I remembered. Don't start before sundown. Don't use your real name. If you hear someone call you, don't answer. Walk, never run. If someone leaves the circle, the game continues. Simple, almost harmless. One boy broke a rule on purpose. He laughed and ran 3 steps before stopping, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The other children didn't react. They just adjusted their positions and kept playing. The game didn't punish mistakes. It ignored them. That bothered me more than anything else. I tried asking one of the kids where the rules came from. She shrugged like I'd asked where rain comes from. "Everyone knows them," she said. "You don't ask." An hour later, the smell returned. Wasn't strong, not at first. Just a thin layer of damp earth beneath the air, creeping into my nose while I stood outside in the open. I checked my shoes, the ground, the trees. Everything was dry. Still, by the time I walked home, the scent clung to my jacket like it had chosen me. Inside, I found myself opening drawers I hadn't touched since childhood. Old notebooks, school papers, a thin folder at the back of the closet. Inside it was a list, written in my handwriting dated years ago. The 5 rules, no explanation, no ending. I stared at the page until the paper began to smell like dust and soil. That was when it hit me, an understanding that settled quietly without panic. The rules weren't complete. They never had been. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the circle again, older than everyone else, holding a rule I couldn't read. The smell was everywhere, heavy and calm, waiting. When I woke up, it was already dark, and the house felt smaller. Outside, children's voices counted softly, in unison, as if they were measuring something that could not be stopped. The next evening, one of the children didn't show up. I noticed it immediately, though I couldn't have said why. The circle looked complete at first glance, the spacing careful, the movements precise. Only after a few minutes did I realize there was a pause where someone should have been standing. A space no one stepped into. A gap the game refused to close. I asked around, neighbors, parents, a teacher I recognized from childhood. The answers were polite and brief. Which kid? I don't think you're remembering that right. There's always been the same number. When I said the name out loud, the smell appeared. It slid into the conversation without warning, damp and heavy, cutting the air short. The woman I was speaking to stopped mid-sentence, her eyes unfocusing for just a second. Then she shook her head, smiled too quickly, and changed the subject. I didn't try again. That night, I searched the house. In the attic, beneath a box of winter clothes, I found a thin notebook I didn't remember owning. Inside were entries written by different hands, different years. Names, dates, notes about the game. Every entry followed the same pattern, careful observations, attempts to understand, growing unease. Each one ended the same way, mid-sentence, mid-thought, as if the writer had simply stepped away and never come back. The smell filled the attic while I read, soaking into the paper, into my skin. I understood then that the missing child wasn't gone in the way people usually disappear. He hadn't left. He had been removed from memory, from language, from the space where people are counted. The next morning, his desk at school was gone, not empty, gone, like it had never existed. Photographs on bulletin boards shifted when I looked at them too long. Class pictures felt wrong, the way a word feels wrong when you repeat it until it loses meaning. I started counting people everywhere I went. The totals never stayed the same. By evening, the smell followed me constantly, on the sidewalk, in my car, in the grocery store aisle. No one else reacted. Only I seemed to notice when it thickened, when it warned me without urgency. The children kept playing. They never looked confused. They never asked questions. When I watched them, I realized something that made my stomach turn cold. They weren't afraid of losing players. They were used to it. That night, as I washed my hands, I caught myself counting my fingers twice, just to be sure. The smell lingered, patient and familiar, and for the first time, I wondered how many gaps the town could hold before it noticed one shaped exactly like me. By the 4th night, the town itself began to feel involved. The smell no longer waited for dusk. It drifted through the streets in the late afternoon, faint but unmistakable, settling into doorways and bus stops, curling around parked cars. I caught it on the wind, impossible and wrong, as if the air had learned a new habit and refused to let it go. People moved differently now. Conversations ended sooner. Porch lights came on earlier. Windows closed while the sky was still blue. No one said why. They didn't need to. I walked downtown past stores that had survived on routine for decades. The hardware shop was open, but the owner didn't look up when I entered. The cafe served coffee in silence. The radio turned off, cups clinking too loudly in the absence of music. Every place felt temporarily occupied, like a set waiting for actors who would never arrive. The children played closer to the center of town now. Not the playground anymore, but the empty lot near the old municipal building. Their circle adjusted easily to the new space, expanding without discussion. I noticed adults crossing the street to avoid walking through it, even when it meant taking the long way home. No one acknowledged the reason. Avoidance had become instinct. The smell thickened there. Not overwhelming, just present, layered beneath everything else. It didn't chase me. It didn't threaten. It existed with the confidence of something that belonged. That's when I understood the game wasn't acting on the players. It was changing the town. Streetlights flickered at odd intervals, never fully going dark, never steady. Sounds failed to carry. I could hear my own footsteps, but not their echo. Even traffic seemed muffled, as if distance had lost meaning. I went to the local records office the next morning. I told myself I was looking for proof, something solid. Birth records, census lists, school enrollment numbers. The clerk helped me politely, efficiently, and found nothing wrong. But the numbers didn't line up. Each year showed small, reasonable changes. One less here, one more there. No sudden losses. No gaps large enough to question. Yet when I compared them to what I remembered, the totals felt thinner, stretched too far over too much time. The smell followed me through the building, faint but steady. It lingered over the filing cabinets, pressed into the paper, patient. I realized then that the town wasn't losing people. I started noticing the pattern too late to pretend it wasn't meant for me. The smell began to arrive before anything else happened. Not after. Not during. It came first, quiet and almost considerate, like a knock you were expected to answer. Once I understood that, I couldn't unsee it. Every strange pause, every missing detail, every small shift in the town was preceded by that same damp, earthen scent, settling in as if to announce what was about to change. It wasn't random. It was scheduled. I tested the idea carefully, the way you touch something hot without fully committing. When the smell appeared outside the grocery store, I waited. 15 minutes later, the cashier froze mid-sentence, frowned, and asked me to repeat myself. She didn't remember the question she'd just asked. By the time I left, the smell was gone, and so was her confusion. The town moved on. It always did. I went back to the notebook from the attic. This time, I read it slowly, not for what was written, but for what wasn't. The gaps between entries. The dates that came closer together toward the end. The way the handwriting in each journal grew steadier, calmer, as if the writers had stopped resisting something and decided to understand it instead. One line appeared more than once, phrased differently each time but carrying the same meaning. The game doesn't choose at random. There is an order. It moves inward. I started paying attention to who noticed the smell. Children never did. Most adults didn't. A few paused, frowned, inhaled twice. Those were the ones who vanished from conversations next. I realized with a slow, sinking clarity that I had moved ahead of the line without meaning to. Leaving the town had protected me once. Coming back had placed me closer to the center than I'd ever been before. Memory mattered. Awareness mattered. The game didn't punish ignorance, but it rewarded attention. That night, the smell stayed with me alone. I checked the street. No one else reacted. No windows opened. No faces turned. It followed me from room to room, soft and familiar, settling into the corners like it had always lived there. For the first time, it didn't feel invasive. It felt personal. I opened the notebook again and turned to the last page. It was blank when I'd found it. Now there was a single sentence, written in my handwriting, still slightly damp. The final rule is not given to everyone. I didn't remember writing it. Outside, the children's voices counted softly, keeping time. The smell deepened, patient and exact, and I understood where I stood in the order. Not next. Last. By the 6th night, the game had grown quiet. Not in the way children lose energy or laughter fades. It was quieter in a different way, heavier, deliberate, as if the town itself had hushed in anticipation. I watched from the edge of the old lot, where the children had gathered once again, now in a circle larger than I remembered, their spacing perfect, almost ritualistic. They moved with an ease I didn't recognize, eyes focused, hands steady. The game had evolved while I wasn't looking. The smell came first, naturally, gently, lingering around me like an old companion. It didn't chase, it didn't warn. It simply announced the beginning. I breathed it in, letting it anchor me. It clung to my hair, my sleeves, my skin, until the air inside me smelled like earth and dust. Every step toward the circle thickened it, as if the game itself was noticing my presence, acknowledging me. I was the only adult outside the circle. Every parent, every neighbor, remained just far enough away to watch but not participate. Their eyes darted toward the children, then back to their homes, cautious, unwilling, or maybe trained to avoid noticing. Only I felt the tension in the air, the hum beneath the quiet. The children, for their part, kept counting softly, methodically, never breaking rhythm. Their voices were low, steady, echoing in the stillness, each syllable precise, controlled. And then I saw it, a mark on the ground. Not painted, not carved, not obvious. Just a faint impression in the dirt, like a footprint pressed in wet clay, impossibly centered in the circle. I knew immediately it was meant for me. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to step back, to run, to forget the game and the rules and the smell that had been trailing me for nights. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something stronger than fear held me in place. The children's voices slowed, synchronizing perfectly with my heartbeat. Time seemed to stretch. The smell intensified, deeper, richer, as if pulling me inward. My own steps felt heavier, measured, precise. I stepped into the circle, and the children parted just enough to make room, silent and unreactive, their eyes glimmering with knowledge they had not earned yet seemed to possess. I could feel it now. The game didn't punish. It didn't shout. It didn't even demand. It simply required compliance. Everything I had witnessed, the missing children, the gaps in memory, the strange silences of the town, was part of its rhythm. And tonight I was meant to understand it. The notebook I had carried pressed against my chest, damp with sweat and the lingering scent, and the final page seemed to rise to meet me. The 6 rules, 5 familiar, 1 hidden, were no longer distant lines on paper. They existed in the space between breaths, in the quiet moments before the next number was called, in the scent of wet soil that clung to my skin. And then I saw the rule. The 6th rule, not written, not spoken. It appeared in the edges of my vision, whispered in the scent itself. Not threatening, not instructing, just identifying my role, my place. I didn't need to read it to understand. I could feel the truth of it settle in my chest like a stone. I was the last player. The game had chosen me. The town, the children, the smell, the gaps, all of it pointed to this single fact. The game was not ending. It was simply moving on. I stepped fully into the circle. The children's voices resumed counting, and the night folded around us, calm, patient, and absolute. The final rule rested lightly on my shoulders, not as a threat but as a designation. I was the keeper now, the one who understood what the others could not. The order was clear. I was last, and in being last, I was everything the game required. The smell lingered long after my first steps into the circle, settling over the town, over the lot, over me. Not as punishment, not as warning, not as signal. It simply existed. And I understood, finally, that I could not leave. That I had been part of this long before I returned, and now I would remain until the next player arrived. The game waited, patient, endless, and I had become its measure. The night was unnervingly still. Not the ordinary still of midnight when houses sleep and the wind dies down, but the kind that felt deliberate, almost patient, like the world itself was holding its breath for something that had always been meant to happen. I stood in the center of the circle, the children arranged around me with the precision of ritual dancers, their soft voices counting, low and steady, each number sliding into the next without pause. I had tried to speak, to ask questions, but the air felt thick with expectation. Words didn't belong here, they had no weight. The smell, the earth and dust scent that had trailed me since my arrival, was stronger now, wrapping around me like a cloak. It wasn't unpleasant. It wasn't threatening. It was a presence, patient, precise, acknowledging my arrival into the center. I breathed it in, filling my lungs with its damp, familiar weight. Every fiber of me understood. The game was no longer a legend, no longer a pastime for children. It was alive, and it was mine to hold. I reached into the notebook I had carried with me all these nights. The pages were blank, save for the familiar 5 rules. 5 lines I had known by heart for years, scrawled in my own handwriting in a style I barely recognized as my own. The 6th rule was absent. It had never been written. It had never been needed until now. I closed my eyes. The counting slowed around me, the rhythm shifting subtly, like the soft pulse of water against the shore. I felt the children's eyes on me, though they never blinked, never shifted. They were aware. Not of me as a person, but of my role. The circle wasn't about them. It never had been. It was about the order, the sequence, and I had arrived at the end. The 6th rule revealed itself slowly, not in words, but in sensation. In the way the night stretched and bent, the way the scent deepened without pressing. I could feel it at the base of my spine, a quiet insistence that settled across my shoulders, into my bones. It was not instruction. It was not threat. It was designation. It was mine to understand, and nothing more was needed. I knelt in the center of the circle, feeling the imprint of the dirt beneath me, faint but unmistakable, like the ground had always remembered the shape I was meant to occupy. The children's counting became a single, low hum, a resonance that harmonized with the rhythm in my chest. Time stretched and blurred. Outside the circle, the town waited in its uncanny silence. Streetlights glimmered weakly. Doors remained closed. The usual sounds of life seemed paused, reluctant to intrude. Only the scent remained, steady, binding, affirming. I realized the truth fully, painfully, beautifully. The game had never been about winning or losing. It had never been about rules or obedience. It had always been about awareness, about order, about the gaps, the spaces between, the silent places that no one else noticed. The missing children, the vanishing footsteps, the conversations that seemed to skip a line, the fading records, they were all part of the rhythm, a rhythm that moved inward that led to this moment. And I was it, the last player, the one chosen, the one who understood, who could feel the full weight of the game's intention, who could step into the center without fear because fear had nothing to do with it. Fear was irrelevant. Awareness was all that mattered. I rose to my feet. The children parted slightly, making space as if acknowledging an unspoken law. The air around me seemed heavier, denser, waiting. I felt the 6th rule settle over me. It was not written. It was not spoken. It existed in the pull of the circle, in the scent that clung to my skin, in the quiet hum of the counting voices. The 6th rule was simple, entirely so, yet absolute. I did not need words. I understood in the marrow of my bones. The game continues. The order remains. You are the measure. Everything else. The disappearing children, the town's strange compliance, the lingering gaps in memory, the absence of echoes fell into place. It made sense now. The game was not ending. It never ended. It moved through time, through people, through awareness itself. And I was its fulcrum, its center, its keeper. I walked the circle slowly, deliberately, taking in each child's unwavering eyes. They counted as they always had, and I counted with them, matching the rhythm, absorbing the space between numbers. The night stretched, pliable, unyielding, alive in ways I could feel but never name. I realized I was not afraid. I was steady. I was ready. I was the last player, and by being the last, I had become everything the game required. Outside the circle, the town exhaled in silence. The air was thick with anticipation, but calm, patient, waiting for the next ripple. I knew then that the game would eventually call another, though not tonight. The children would vanish as they always did, and the gaps would continue to grow, filled only when someone else stepped forward. But for now, the game rested on me. Its weight was not punishment, not threat, not obligation. It was recognition. The sixth rule was complete. It was mine. I looked at the sky. The stars were faint, hidden behind clouds that moved impossibly slowly, as if watching. I inhaled the smell of earth and dust one last time, letting it settle inside me. And I understood. I had returned not to leave, but to stay. Not to play, but to hold the order, the rhythm, the measure. The game had always been waiting for this. And now, it was endless.